everyone. This is Jim Coe, and this is one of my 3D modeled scenes. And because traditional artists and many others find the 3D modeling process a bit mysterious, I thought I would take you on a few quick video tours of some of my renderings and show you how they're created. This is a rendering that I call the Thinker. Let's talk a little bit about the workflow involved in one of these images. This is a 3D art project, so that means that the figure and the room are actually three-dimensional models that are totally posable, are rendered out as 2D flat images in the last step in the process of creating one of these scenes, with which you can make two-dimensional images that are very similar to photographs. So let's look at the workflow involved here. Of course, the first part of the workflow is coming up with an idea for a scene and then pre-visualizing how that idea will look, perhaps making a pencil sketch. I often do that. And then getting an idea of the storytelling quality of the image and how you want to present it and how you want to light it and so forth. Then of course the second step in this workflow is to create the figure and pose the figure in the scene. I don't pretend to be a good enough 3D sculptor to create posable 3D human figures of high quality. That takes a skilled team of workers usually to produce one of these 3D figures, because the figure not only has to be extremely realistic, but to be practical, the figure has to be posable, which means that it has to have a skeleton with all of the parts of the anatomy movable and posable. It has to have special textures. It's a very complex object, these 3D figures. So I started by purchasing a 3D figure from a company called Daz 3D, who makes the best human mannequin type models. Let's have a look at their website where I can show you this model. This is the Daz 3D website. In this scene I used Victoria, which is the current female figure of the highest quality that's available, and look at some other views of her. There's another image. You can see that Victoria 4 looks different in these different images because the artists have created different characters based on the same base figure. And the hair is separate from the model, so different hair styles can be added. You can also buy poses. These are some of the poses that go with this figure. So this is the first part of the workflow where you obtain a figure, and in the next stage in the workflow you'll use an editing program, which also comes from Daz 3D, to pose the figure, add the clothing, add the hair, and so forth. So let's look at that. This is a program called Daz Studio, and I use the free version. It's a very excellent program for posing figures. Over here on the left hand side panel we have all of the controls for the different parts of the figure. Here is the hair product, here are the shoes, here is the shirt, here are the pants, and here's Victoria herself. And as I mentioned, these human figure models are extremely complex and detailed. For example, here is her left hand, her left pinky finger first joint, her left pinky finger second joint, her left pinky finger third joint, all of which are independently posable, and each one can be expanded or contracted or scaled different ways. And of course textures can be added, different textures to each part. So there are a lot of details in posing a model like this. The tongue is posable, the nostril amount of flare is posable, all kinds of things are posable. So there's a lot of detail involved, and you can spend a lot of time getting a realistic, believable pose. Notice here in this pose that I used, I didn't bother to extract her hand from her thigh, which it happens to be inside of, because in my image only her head and shoulders are going to show. Let's zoom in a bit here and I can show you A little bit about how posing actually works. Let's look at, for instance, the way that one could change the pose of her hair. Looking straight on, I can choose her hair up here. And let's look at the head part of her hair. And over here on the right hand side, we have various controls for doing the actual posing, moving the parts of her anatomy around, or expanding them, or changing textures and so forth. For instance, this is the head side-to-side setting for her hair. You can see that her hair is carefully fitted to her skull, and I can change that. I can make it larger or smaller. I can move it from front to back, side to side, rotate, and scale it different ways. And that's a little bit about how the actual posing works in DAZ Studio. Now the idea in my workflow is that I will pose this figure and then I will export it as a file and import it into my final 3D program and render them. And in that other program, the next step in the workflow, I will use my special high quality skin texture product, customize the skin textures, customize the hair, customize the textures of the clothing and all of that. I can make the clothing and the skin texture and the hair much more realistic in the other program. For the environment of my Thinker 3D image, I decided to use another commercial product. This is a room, a dystopian environment room known as The Ministry by my favorite 3D modeler, a guy whose handle is Stonemason. Stonemason's real name is Stefan Morel, and he makes wonderful models and sells some of them on DAZ 3D. Let's look at an image of one of his pieces. This is an image of, let's make it a little bit bigger here. This is an image called Futurescape, and it's typical of the kind of future modeling that he does. All of these are his models, I believe, although some of the background buildings may not be. So he's a wonderful modeler. I really love using his materials and models.